save the planet in Earthbound from Nintendo.
So, Earthbound, you probably saw the title and went, hey, I know that game. That's the one the Smash Brothers kids are from. You know, the ones that say pecan pie, pecan butter. Yeah, whatever. I love Earthbound. It's what I consider my favorite game of all time, though it does have some issues. I'm not here to talk about those and explain every small minute detail that went into the development of this game, as there are a heck of a lot of more qualified people out there to talk about that. On top of the fact of the localization itself, there's a lot of other people talking about that, as well as a whole book on it, which I highly recommend. It's actually a really good read. But what I wanted to make this video about, and it's something that has stuck with me since I first played Earthbound in 2013, and it constantly comes back to me where I'm like, I should talk about this. No, I want to talk about this. There are so many underlying messages in Earthbound that, regardless of what age or point in your life you play it at, something's gonna stick out at you. And upon a recent replay, after more than a decade of first playing this game, there's a lot more messages that have popped out to me, especially being in my adulthood now, that I never really experienced as a teenager when I first played this game. One of the biggest ones I think out there is that life it sucks. It really does suck regardless of your age or time in your life, and having that form of escapism where you get this childlike innocence and happiness similar to Ness has at the beginning of the journey that he goes through, it's something we all crave. And I really do think Earthbound, with one of its major prominent messages, is finding that sense of escapism through others and in turn yourself. There is an extremely massive underlying theme of this game just being about Ness becoming a teenager or in turn a young adult compared to this childlike innocence he has, where you have all these things that you would normally ignore and move to the back of your head, but being a freshly aged teenager or just right on the cusp of being one, depending on the interpretation of Ness you have, they're gonna be beyond your mind. It's something you can't ignore anymore. Things such as the death of friends, trauma or abuse that shapes one development in their adolescence, and the mistrust of others like Pokey. These new feelings the child feels when he's just like, this isn't a typical crush, like love. All of these messages, I think, really culminate into a major message that, looking at it through this perspective, gave me a whole new light to Earthbound. It's about escapism through friends, through family, through media, through hell, even Itoy himself. It's about that, and just using that as a coping mechanism to get through life, to get through society, all these types of things that you're just trying to avoid, where it's telling you, hey, it's not bad to use this, but just know that you can't use it constantly. And as we go through this game, through this perspective, I want to just talk more about moments that have stuck out with me where I'm like, wow, how did I not realize this was kind of underlying with that?
スーパーファミコンソフトマザー2大人も子供もお姉さんも
I think a big aspect of this escapism theme in Earthbound is the fact that Ness, Paula, Jeff, and Pooh, they're all adolescents, or at least not adults. Because, yeah, you have this viewpoint through the eyes of a child that everyone is different both physically and mentally. I mean, in terms of a Western perspective, i.e., the typical American viewpoint, the nuclear family. Ness and Paula, I mean, for God's sake, her last name is Jones in one of the manga adaptations. Wait, is that another to add to my fictional family? Both of them are these typical American kids that when you think of that, they fit the ideal immediately. And the first person they are introduced to outside of their norms, their hometowns, is someone from what I guess you could argue is Greenland or Iceland. Someone so vastly different than both of them in terms of lives, as well as the fact that this is the first non-hometown of either of them, and it's... I mean, for God's sake, this could be a f***ing red light district if you want to be real. Regardless, when it comes to Jeff as well, he is such a culture shock to introduce to all of them, who's the son of this renowned scientist, Dr. Endonuts, which, when you're playing as Jeff once he first joins, you can kind of tell that he's overshadowed by this massive reputation his family has, where he kind of feels isolated in this boarding school during these massive points of development in your life. And on top of that, his only assumed true friend that assists him throughout this section is Tony, a boy who is confirmed queer other, which is another aspect of life that not everyone follows the same norms as you. And yeah, Jeff's section is just a lot of differences of life and going into the world and growing up with your own views. It's something I began noticing with this theme of escapism, where you get scared of these differences, these norms, just how intimidating, scary reality can just be with all of this. And I know, Earthbound is a funny game. I mean, for God's sake, the way Jeff meets his father is after buying a monkey for the price of a pack of gum. They ride the
I need about 350.
Loch Ness Monster, and then he goes through a joke at JRPGs. I promise Earthbound is a very deep game despite this shit, but after meeting his father throughout that wild situation, he keeps minced words that a mediocre father would, in the sense of, oh hey there! See, it's not a bad thing I'm not in your life. You turned out great! And immediately they hardly have more than one conversation and he's sent off the thread. And it's kind of sad that after that, pretty much Jeff is thrown into yet another wild culture shock of, wow, 2 of these 4 kids are based off the stereotypical American or, well, Eagle Land kids, both with families in their picture, though Ness's is implied to have a lot of issues given the phone and the dialogue brought up by Pokey's father with the debt. It's not seen as odd to any of them despite how jarring of a situation they've all been put in. They just kind of accept it. At this point, all of them have had their own small journeys to get to where they are now, and regardless of how wild they are, they're all just kids growing up, and they realize that regardless of all these issues they have, it doesn't matter. They're able to connect through this. I really do love this, as it's also a play on just childhood innocence of where you understand that everyone has different upbringings. Some people are dramatically different from each other or just abnormal compared to someone else's point of view, but those differences we can set aside to bond and connect over what we use to escape depression, dread, all of this reality together. At this point in their lives, it's a weird stage of life. We can't deny that. If you're an adult like me, yeah, puberty is just weird. Being a teenager is weird. And that's this awkward stage that they're put in as they have this bonded fate, and they just don't care about these weird things that are happening because they have each other, and you know, that's what being okay, maybe that's the wrong game, but you get it. Going more in depth on how they kind of use their friendship as a way to just deal with these horrible things known as the real world. You ever think about how screwed up some of the situations are that these kids are put into before they meet each other? For one, with Ness, you have to deal with police brutality right off the bat before leaving Onett. You have corruption and greed with his mayor, and it's not really outright stated, but it's heavily implied that he might have been forced to mature early just from being the man of the house with his father being absent. Paula is another interesting case where you have this somewhat overprotective family with her father, but then between her and Ness, they have to deal with this reality that the entertainment industry, outside of pictures and personas entertainers put on, there's a shit ton of corruption in it, and a lot of people, such as the Runaway Five, are forced into this profession instead of doing it out of love how they initially start, and like many believe they still do. And then, yeah, cults and in turn religious extremism is a pretty interesting thing to be thrown on to like a 12-year-old girl here, but there's a lot of undertones on the designs and the real-world inspiration from Japan matching the color scheme. It's a whole bag of its own worms there. But Jeff, finally, with this entire family history that we don't even have an indication of the status of his mother, the neglect that his family gives him, where he's forced to live up to this high expectation that despite the... Yeah, his dad's kind of a dick. All of these experiences that can be seen as traumatic to children at this age without realizing it, especially some of the situations they get into, such as how you get control of Jeff. Bro, that's a fucking prostitute! Yeah, this game is very interesting to say the least, but kind of going back on Ness and not getting too personal with this form of escapism and all these coping mechanisms that you can see in plain sight when you really look at it. I love that Ness's big coping mechanism for when he gets scared, and in turn the status of homesickness, it's his mother. And I know the series is called Mother and all that, but that's who his hero is, the one that always pushes him. And whenever you call back, you hear, "I'm proud of you, you're doing great, honey, and I'll be here for you if you need anything." I think in Earthbound especially, it really does show that as you're going through these harsh aspects of becoming a developing teen, that you're going to start seeing more of these disturbing and outright awful things in your life, that something as simple as a mother's love or just parental support, it can go a long way with helping a child out. So many of the situations that occur in this game, an average person would probably be using some sense of escapism to cope through it, but with these four, they use each other and their company to get through it, and in turn, defeat this giant embodiment of what Itoi himself could have been using escapism techniques as a child to get through during that portion of his life, which, yeah, it's what you're thinking, and we'll cover that later, but we got a new city to get to. Now, we're actually gonna skip the next area and get to the main city because, yeah, I feel like we should save that for a little bit later, but we are now in this unreal situation for Ness and Jeff, a megaopolis city, Fourside. And the reason I say for those two, other than Paula, is I feel like she's at least accustomed to a biggish city compared to the two boys. As we get further and further in there, looking for this man known as Monotoli, we see Pokey, who's been further corrupted by this world, obsessed with greed, showing that's what he's been using as a coping mechanism, as he was forced into it alone without friends to guide him, and Gaius was able to get his grasp on him. During this journey of Fourside, after running with her favorite contract-tied boys, Paula, the only one, as I mentioned, that wouldn't be intimidated by this, is taken by, well, that thing. And now a majority of the events is where we get a big aspect of escapism that... Oh, Moonside, I've been wanting to talk about you for a bit now because you are a good symbolism for a bad trip. And look, it's 2020 whatever when you're watching this, and we're all assumedly adults here, or at least open to adult themes, and an aspect of escapism some people use is narcotics or drugs, and having a bad trip or hangover. If you live that kind of life, it'll give you the same feeling that these two are going through, where you just feel unnerved, where you just have it slam and hit you in the face, where you're just in agony screaming to yourself in the head like, what are you doing? Why did I do this? And feeling so unnerved, where everything is the opposite in this area from Fourside, would just have these two kids with no knowledge of city life just going insane. All of this for Ness and Jeff is definitely unsettling and just making them unnerved, anxious, and on top of that, you have this supposed death of a friend right outside of the bar before Moonside, just adding to it. And don't even get me started on the enemies. Hell, when talking about the enemies, let's bring up how a lot of the tracks in this game have this vibe of something's not right. Now, let's go back in time a little bit before Paula was kidnapped to Saturn Valley, and yeah, this really does embrace the time period of cute yet kind of ugly and weird of the mid-90s, but dude, the 90s were weird. I mean, have you seen the marketing in this game? Do you want a scratch and sniff sticker of the boss of this area that's a pile of puke? Belch aside, let's get to one of the aspects of Saturn Valley I think a lot of people remember the most, like I do, the coffee breaks. Because I feel like this is a genuine break of self-realization, not just for Ness, Paula, and Jeff, but for you yourself. Where it's kind of telling you, hey, it's been rough out there. The beginning of the game was a little rough. Hell, maybe the beginning of your life was rough, but you're doing good despite those hurdles. It's like growing up, where, yeah, stuff like puberty, heightened emotions, situations that you just notice that you can't do anything of, sucks ass, but you're doing good. Don't put yourself down. You shouldn't have to feel bad about having to take a few breaks to yourself where you're just catching your bearings, taking control of your mental state. It's such a small yet great message I feel like many could use at this point in their lives, regardless of what age you were playing the game. The first time I ever played it, I was around 12 to 14, so I was about Ness's age, and they've always really stuck with me, even being oh god, yeah, that's right, I'm a man now. I have the sense of humor of a 16-year-old, but I guess I'm an adult. You know, sometimes I have an overbearing, stressful day at work, and I just say, screw it. I just need an hour to myself to reflect, and it helps. Back in Foresight here, after the situation of tripping out balls in the back rooms of a bar, we finally saved Paula with the help of the Runaway Five, which, to cover a little bit into that, we helped them a second time by getting a diamond after we figured out the definition of, the third strongest mole was, and they repaid the favor just because, we're good kids. And we finally see Monotoli, the one we've assumed to be this disgusting, horrible man based off the situations of Foresight throughout the journey of this town and his alliances and many NPCs, and he was just being manipulated and misused by the forces of Gygas, and he's kind of pathetic. The small bits of greed and darkness in him were just expanded upon by the Manny Manny statue from Moonside that we got rid of. It kind of shows in this situation as we don't know the full side of it. Paula just immediately tells the other two that, hey, I'm okay. In fact, Monotoli's not a bad guy. He was just being misused. And we didn't know the full story of it. Again, look at the dude. He's pathetic and he feels guilty about what he's done, showing full remorse. And it's this little lesson of, hey, yeah, some people are corrupted, but the moment they show they want to change, embrace it. In fact, help them out maybe, because you never know if they're actually serious or not, and if they are, go for it. But as he wants to assist us in a little bit to get the Summers with his helicopter, we... Oh, Pokey, you are a big story I gotta save later, though. After an awkward situation with Jeff's dad again, and him assisting us getting to Summers, we have another bit of trauma and worldviews being altered for the crew as we have another situation with cults! Oh boy, it's not like there's this many cults in the world. So they assist out this club known as the Stoic Club in order to get some cake during this visit to Summers, but we get a call from Tony asking for our name? Yeah, like our name, but this will tie in later, don't worry. I remember the first time I saw this, I was like, oh yeah, like me. So anyways, after helping out that cult, let's have some kit. Dude, Jesus, how often do these kids try psychedelics? For God's sake, Ness has tripped out more than I have. Oh, okay, that's a little bit of a digital footprint right there, but we've taken into our final chosen one, Pooh. I feel like that name might have aged badly, but given this is from Itoi, a Japanese man, and it's a parody of the Western perspective of the world, I guess it's okay, since it's stereotypical American interpretations. Into the perspective of Pooh, we have a lot of knowledge dropped onto us that Pooh is in fact the prince of this country known as Dalim, which takes inspiration from a lot of Asian cultures, who has one final duty before getting ready to take the title of ruler that he's been built up to, knowing of this prophecy of Gygas. Boo trainin'. I'm not even gonna tap around it. This part of the game really f***ed me up as a kid because, good lord, is this such a shift change. For one, this game is fucked up and that, trauma can make you feel like your cognitive and physical abilities are being stripped away. Forced isolation from the world as occurs similar to an anxiety or panic attack. And Pooh is just having to give up all of these things about himself, like his ability to reach, his ability to smell, his ability to feel, and it's over. After he gives up his mental state, it's just over. I think what's equally as disturbing about this moment is that it's not even acknowledged. Just immediately after it happens, you're basically sent to the palace, and then you get a transmission from Ness, Paula, and Jeff saying, hey, you're chosen one, come to Summers, we need you now, and then he just comes instantaneously professing his undying loyalty to Ness, which... is his last name Roanoa? As we keep progressing into these more and more interesting situations with differences of culture, keeping everyone on the edge during this uneasy portion of life, we still have this bonded group of four that, during these final areas of the game, before hitting the 8th melody, it's more and more engaging and interesting, yet you still have this bond where you know that they're in this for life. They go through the Middle East, literal parody of dungeon design, and... yeah, this world is shaping more and more wildly as we get into the biggest horror of this game. A Beatles reference. A little bit before this, though, Pooh is taken from the crew as they leave Scaraba to learn more about his duties as a prince, and he comes back a little bit sporadically during Deep Darkness, where shows that we can all rely on each other. Ain't that a little bit of wait, that's a One Piece reference. God damn it, I gotta stop with those. Upon the squad being reunited, we meet these little guys known as the Tendas, who guard the next and final progression of the Melody quest, but we gotta go back to Winners as Apple Kid tells us, yeah, they're kidnapped, and we get a little bit of catch up with some of the previous cast, such as our $2 bubblegum monkey, who... yeah, he's got a little girlfriend there. And we go into Stonehenge to save our friends from the Starman Deluxe, and is this what National Geographic thinks happens with the pyramids? We skip a little bit past this, as I don't want to bring up the horrors that are the Sword of Kings.
Impacts your ability to... What?!
We go back to help the Tendas overcome shyness, and I swear I would die for these little guys. After having a little bit of tea with the Tendas, we get to the 7th Sanctuary location, where afterwards, the Sanctuary itself is Ness's mind speaking to the group. And he's reminiscing of the journey he's had, showing that Ness is realizing he's growing up much more than this boy that fully woke up from this meteor in the opening hour of the game, and then... dude, look how small we are. I think this is just its own analogy showing just how small you are in the grander scheme of the world and universe. Despite the dinosaurs, the statement still stands that, yeah, we are this really small speck in this insane, awesome, epic universe that we don't even know the gist of it still. After a little traversal and a 2-form boss battle with... is that so?
That is not Solid Snake!
We have our full melodies and... we are inside the psyche of Ness, Magickin, which is his final escapism mechanism, possibly being the doubt of him ever being able to live up to this enlightenment prophecy and wanting to stay in this world of his childhood, or in a deeper meaning of interpretation, a world of consciousness where he dives into seeing the perspectives of everyone that he's met, with how their views of the world, even meeting his own self, who idolizes what he's become. That being a strong young man that can protect his family when his father isn't in the picture, similar to a mindset that I've grown up into that I realized was something I'm completely content with in life. After a bit of travel into Magickin, we finally enter a house here that represents his courage in the form of 5 flying men who, fun little fact, their theme is a sped up version of the Game Over music if you want to hear. Cute little touch. But there's one more obstacle in Ness's mind, the Mani Mani statue again. This final bit of negativity is the final obstacle before Ness can truly feel content with fighting Gygus. Unlike the other one, which was created by Gygus by an unknown means, as a result of Ness's journey of growth and self-actualization, he is able to overpower this Mani Mani statue, and in turn, Magickin ceases to be, as this childlike innocence that this world has been created from is no longer needed for an escapism for him. What I think is really interesting about Magickin as well is that it always disappears when the need for why it was there ceases to be. Hence, with Mother 1, when Queen Mary is reminded of the 8 melodies, magic begins disappearing and completely goes away once she's realized, hey, these memories of this alien child me and my husband raised, they're memories now, and I can't stay in them. I have to just look at them fondly and cherish them instead of engulfing my life into it. With all that said and done, Ness has finally matured into an adult who doesn't need to rely on any kind of coping mechanisms. Alone, though. Hence, alone. He has a group of now lifelong friends who are going to be there for him in these times of need, and he lets the group know after having an epiphany from his self-worth that they need to live up to this mentality and finally go confront this main antagonist guy. How is it pronounced? It's pronounced Geeg? Yeah, let's just call him Gygas or Gygas, since that's a lot easier to remember and say.
He needs your help to defeat Gigagas.
Before going and confronting him, however, we find out that we need one more item to help Andonuts finish the phase distorter, a machine that he's been working on to go into the past to fight Gygas to travel back. Being a meteor fragment, which makes this journey go full circle to show how much you've grown. That the town has become run by aliens at this point, and going there instead of feeling safe and secure to see your mother to help you, it's the reverse. Your mother's relieved to see you, and now you're friends, which, as you grow up, maturing, leaving home as a person, it kind of becomes reality where you realize the family who raised you is just happy to see how much you've grown, going through different parts of life that they've experienced, such as college, marriage, hell, even creating your own family. It's a scary thing, but they know what it's like, and seeing you be at that level that they were once at, where they know they don't have to fear for you anymore, and know that you can take on that. It's an incredible feeling, and vice versa, just having family members being able to assist you. So anyways, we got the meteorite, let's get out of that sappy stuff, and get to the finale and show you what escapism really means in this franchise, and what I think is my interpretation of how Itoi used this game to show his escapism from his confrontation with Gygas. Before we even get to the past, there's one thing we have to do, and it's similar to mood training. We have to let go of this innocence. The smile of the group, hell, even in sprite form, is going to be stripped away from us as you're thrown into this horror-esque finale where you meet Andonuts in the Cave of the Past, and he basically tells you, you guys are going to have to be put into robots. Your spirits, your life, it's going to have to be put in there. I don't even know if you'll be able to come back, and you might never even return, and there's not going to be anything of you to show who you were besides that red baseball cap you have on that lifeless husk, man. It's kind of harsh, and it's pretty insane and intense. But now we're in the past, and the enemies are at their strongest and their worst. Nothing but this haunting track just standing with you in this void of a world before a crack in this landmass is all that remains in front of you, and as you enter it, there's this grotesque, pulsating interior of a cavern that's heavily interpreted to be, well, yeah, let's get into that because it's Gygas time. No, I'm just kidding, Pokey's here as well. This embodiment of all the evil that we faced, and someone we once had as a child and friend that's been corrupted by this malice and darkness here, that we can see in the future title. Is it title or titles? Because it's technically a franchise? Whatever. Anyways, we have this long-lost friend that's gone and just completely obsessed with Ness. And let's talk about Pokey a bit here, because this child is corrupted by his idolization of his childhood friend that just starts maturing a lot earlier than him and goes on this journey that he wanted nothing to be a part of, that he potentially could have been a chosen one for. And on top of that, it's shown around the time of Happy Village, this might have been the last bit of humanity and happiness and just pure energy that Pokey might have had in him. In this sense of him just being like, I'm just playing around, I'm screwing with you. Could show that he just wanted some kind of humanization finale or just true closure to his friendship with Ness beforehand. It's sad because he's a sad excuse of a human being, and we see that even in his childhood from the opening moment, he's abused, he has nothing, his family's full of deadbeat assholes. It's sad. I think what's more depressing about Pokey is just how realistic he is to childhood friends that people can have, where you're super close when you're really young, but as you grow up, having opposing views, different paths and experiences that shape you into adulthood. they're not the same. You have no idea what your childhood friends that you might have known long ago are now. You don't even know what they've gone through in their life, and that's just how it is. People can change as they age, and it can be for the better or, for Pokey's case, the absolute damn worst. But now we move on to the big iconic one here, Giggle Gas. And do I need to say anything given all of these videos here? It's a f***ing disturbing moment as you enter this final bit of escapism the game presents, that even Itoy himself is showing he needed to have escapism tendencies in order to stay sane in this fucked up world we're in. And let's actually get into that, because for those who haven't seen the thousands of articles and videos on this subject, Gygas is a result of his sequence in a movie that traumatized Itoy as a child that he walked into accidentally. The film that he walked into in English is known as The Military Policeman and the Dismembered Beauty, which in the moment he walked into he perceived as a lovemaking scene, which, not having any context of the movie, he assumed it was, well, more of an assault sequence, and that traumatized him. Sequence of events can be in some of the forms that Gygas takes as it furthers into the fight, which, I'm gonna say this, you probably have noticed it, and it's been denied by Itoy, but the fact that the SNES just casually and accidentally randomly made these images, I'm just saying there's gotta be something fishy there, unless it's just completely coincidental, which is absolutely insane. But at this point in the fight, it's just completely intangible to grasp Gygas and the horrors it represents. Humanity's malice, suffering, and the likes. And then, on top of that, with this imagery that Itoy is adding into it from this supposed assault scene with the text that he gives, where it hurts, it hurts, it hurts, I feel good, sounding similar to a sexual assault scene, more or less. It's terrifying to look into, but before you can even do anything else at this point where it's just completely intangible, there's one option left. Praying. This button that has some of the most hit or miss moments in the game's combat. It's your final resort. You call out to your favorite Blues Brothers, Ness's mother, your friends, Tony, but it's not enough. At this point, you, the player, you're praying along with Paula to anything at this point. But that's the thing. Paula finally just breaks this fourth wall and prays to you. That sequence about the name back in Summers in the Tenda Village, it's because of this. And it's why I love that moment so much. I think this is one of the most interesting fourth wall breaks I've seen in a game, especially with the idea of escapism in mind, because what we use for escapism, like media, whether it's movies, music, television, you name it, books even, it's shattering this fourth wall where instead of us using it to escape from reality, it's calling to us to help it out with Gygas. And I think it's just so clever. But with that call to help, it works. Gygas is defeated, Pokey sadly gets away, and, well, we don't want to talk about what he ends up doing. The world, at least, is finally saved. And I think what just makes it hit so much as well is that it also feels like this message of Paula is more Itoy speaking out to the player itself, where it's like, hey, I've been assisted by media in ways when I needed to get away from trauma that haunted me for ages. Don't feel guilty about it, but also realize that it's not the only thing you can use in life. You have to make these connections, these bonds even, to truly find a way to live in life. What I think really makes this theme of escapism hit a lot with Earthbound, and especially media per se, is that it shows you that it can hurt, it can make you angry, irritated, happy, depressed, excited. All of these emotions, they're forms that media can just bring you just to exist. Alright, so like, now that we're at the end, this isn't some, oh, Earthbound is about the meaning of life or whatever. As I was going through the game, again, the last time I played this game I was like 15, 16, and the first time I ever played it, I just barely turned 13. There's so many things that just went over my head, and especially with this game being the RPG horror maker, RPG maker game inspiration for everything, like Undertale, which, the fact Toby Fox made one of the most iconic fucking video game songs ever with that. oh, it's iconic. But Earthbound is a game that there's so much about it that, especially depending on when you play it, like I did when I was a teenager, makes you look back and realize that, yeah, life's gonna suck. It's gonna get hard. There's gonna be things that you can't do alone, but that's not a bad thing. Don't worry about having to ask for help from others. It's completely fine. There's forms of escapism you can use, hence why I named this video what I did. I saw so many escapist themes throughout this that I was just like, damn, how did I never realize this? Like, even Gygas, as I mentioned earlier, seems like it's Itoi's interpretation of how he got over his childhood trauma, and it's not a bad thing. Just as long as you have a remedy to grow your mind as you're growing up, that it's not a bad thing. And Earthbound definitely is a game I would recommend to anyone, even if you're not a big RPG head, that there's so much about this game that is iconic for a reason. I mean, for God's sake, I didn't talk about it, but there's a 3-minute wait behind a waterfall. Who does that kind of shit? Itoi is a madman. And it's why this game is still my favorite game of all time. He's a madman with a great message. Thank you for watching.